Saturday, late afternoon, early spring, a glass dome camera in the soffit of a neighborhood market watched a steady run of small errands on a Mokotów side street in Warsaw. Its time overlay stated 4:12 in the afternoon, its angle canted toward the entrance mats and a rack of umbrellas. In the lower frame, a student in a quilted jacket placed a backpack on her shoulder, a carton of milk, and a receipt folded together in one hand. She paused at the door to balance the carton and tucked the paper into a pocket. The lens recorded the ordinary mechanics of leaving. The detail would later become a hinge. The student was 13, a reliable commuter by city standards. Weekdays, her attendance log at a public middle school showed first bell at 8:05, dismissal at 3:10, robotics club on Tuesdays and Thursdays until 4. On Saturdays, her mother's shift at a pharmacy overlapped with her father's weekend service calls, and the child moved through a short loop by herself, trammed 2 stops to the market, a snack, then a 10-minute walk past a library and a strip of repair shops back to their building. She kept appointments well, a competence learned from timetables. Her vulnerability was built into that habit, an assumption that anything with a badge, logo, or schedule held. At 1:58 that day, the school's weekend gate log captured her exit for a volunteer cleanup on the grounds. At 2:17, her transit card registered a tap-in at a platform reader on Aleja Niepodległości. The back-end server stored card number, kiosk ID, and a timestamp rounded to the nearest 10 seconds. At 2:26, a platform camera recorded her stepping into a southbound tram. At 2:33, the same card logged a tap-out at the stop near the market. The sequence matched her usual loop, corroborated again by the market's point-of-sale terminal at 4:11, ringing through a small purchase, receipt number 3017, card payment approved. Outside, late-day sun hit the tram shelter glass. The shelter bore familiar municipal signage, route diagrams, and, on its side panel, a laminated notice that did not belong. The notice carried a scannable code and a clipped instruction beneath a rideshare logo. The city's maintenance ticket would later record that the adhesive had not been approved. The posting did not appear on any authorized inventory of notices. It had been fixed at an angle calibrated to the height of someone standing in the waiting zone. Across the intersection, a compact hatchback drove past slowly with a delivery magnet on the door and a short PVC mast in the rear window holding a placard common to app-based rides. The car circled the block twice between 3:35 and 4:05, a pattern noted by a parking enforcement vehicle's roof camera as it logged plates for digital chalking. The hatchback driver wore a lanyard and an orange vest over a hoodie. The dashboard held a tablet with a grid of icons in motion. The package of signals amounted to a mask that city life rarely interrogates. It looked like work. The student's phone moved through the same air. It was new enough to still report every known network it met. At 3:56, the phone automatically probed a cafe's guest Wi-Fi, then failed over to cellular when the router required a sign-in. At 3:59, it joined the market's access point long enough to deliver 2 short app notifications. A third notification arrived at 4:13 after she stepped outside. Cellular logs would later show it as one small payload with an image and a link. The image matched a company palette that could be assembled from public web assets. Its timing dovetailed with someone's intent for convergence. 14 minutes before that notification, she had cut down the narrow corridor toward the refrigerated case. Ceiling tiles held a fly-eye lens at each end. The second lens recorded her pausing to consider 2 brands, lifting one carton, setting it back, choosing the other. The purchase tied her to a time-stamped receipt and a contactless payment token. The object as witness sequence, unremarkable choices inside frame, would become the last uncontested minutes of her Saturday. The area around the shelter never looked unsafe on a Saturday. A library across the way returned books through a slot with a ringing clank every few minutes. A florist turned buckets on the sidewalk so stems could breathe. 2 teenagers in team jackets sat on the bench with a bag of chips between them. A municipal officer wrote a citation and peeled it from a pad. By any common measure, this was the public safety dividend of daylight and company. The child's route had been selected to exploit that dividend. The hatchback made its third loop. A rear window camera on a bus recorded its pass at 4:14. the corner of its plate legible through compression artifacts. In the foreground, the student checked her phone. A second camera, higher in the shelter, recorded her raising the device toward the laminated notice for a quick scan. The motion lasted a fraction of a second and caused no visible reaction. Inference would later fill in that the link led to a sign-in screen mimicking a rideshare provider, preloaded to display the shelter's location, and a claim that a driver was nearby. The template required only latitude, longitude, and a few sprites to persuade. At 4:15, the hatchback slowed against the curb. The placard in the rear window, the lanyard, the tablet, each component of the costume worked on the same assumption the student carried, that formatted signs equaled an agreement. The market camera saw nothing of the stop. Its field of view ended at the door. The shelter camera caught the car only at its edge. The most complete capture came from a taxicab's dashboard system 2 car lengths behind, which ran continuously and uploaded clips by the hour to a fleet server. In the upper right corner of that clip, the student reached for the rear door handle and climbed in. Her competence kept time even here. The route home by foot from the shelter typically took 10 minutes. If she accepted a short ride, it shaved that to 4. Her parents' plan for the afternoon assumed her arrival window as 4:30 to 4:45. Household routine flowed from that expectation. A building entrance camera aimed at the lobby mailboxes recorded no arrival by 5. At 5:10, an intercom log registered a ring from the flat to the lobby and back. The call length was under 15 seconds. The absence became its own record. The phone held for 8 minutes. At 4:23, it reported position near Puławska Street, then fell silent. Inference would later list explanations with decreasing likelihood: a powered-off device, a battery exhausted faster than expected on a cool day, a loss of radio under metallic shielding. Facts at that point could not yet declare which applied. The observable artifact was simpler: a last network handshake, and then quiet. The first active search began as a routine courtesy call. At 5:28, the mother stepped out from behind a pharmacy counter, took the phone from a drawer, and dialed. The phone rang twice, according to the carrier detail produced later. No human heard an audible ring in the flat, and the call rolled to a recording. At 5:34, the father left a service address for a boiler inspection, 2 tram stops away, and walked the usual route backward. He stopped at the shelter at 5:49 and scanned the sidewalk and the benches. The laminated notice with the code was still there. He took a photo of it and sent it to the family group thread at 5:51. Metadata from that image, latitude, longitude, device model, would become the first fixed pin investigators used later that evening. At 6:10, the parents reported a missing child to a precinct desk by phone. The log opened an incident at 6:14 and time-stamped the mother's age, the child's description, clothing, the last known location, and the last confirmed time. Dispatch pushed an attention flag to a patrol car nearby. The first canvass began at 6:25, limited to a 3-block radius and any cameras with cooperative owners who were currently on site. The market manager was still present, as was the taxicab driver whose dashcam had already uploaded the clip containing the curb stop to a company cloud. Within 30 minutes, the incident file held 3 short videos and 1 receipt image. The spine of the day began to carry weight. Past that, every minute counted in a different way. The shelter camera stored its footage on a loop that overwrote itself after 72 hours, unless a manual hold was placed. The market's dome cameras held 96 hours. The taxicab's fleet server automatically deleted unflagged clips after 7 days. The transit card system would keep tabs, but the bus roof camera logs rotated after 1 week as well. A municipal traffic stanchion on the next block over wrote number plates to a local buffer that flushed at midnight unless a query cued a preservation. None of these limits were designed around a single disappearance. They were, each of them, designed around ordinary data volumes and budgets. At 7:04, an officer placed holds on the shelter and market systems with a phone call and followed with an email attaching the incident number. The holds would secure Saturday's footage from being erased by the Monday rotation. At 7:21, the officer contacted the Traffic Operations Center to request that any plate images within a small radius at 4:15 be exported to a drive for pickup. The city's on-call engineer received the request and initiated a filter. The plate patching algorithm returned partials with confidence scores. These would matter only if later matched to a specific car. The narrative up to this point was still the child's loop: school log, transit taps, market purchase, sidewalk. She had remained inside infrastructure meant to make individual movement boring on purpose. What changed was that the costume of a service, a vest, a placard, a laminated code, had met that infrastructure at the right angle. An average eye, even a parent's eye, did not parse the difference between authorized and counterfeit outside of training. That gap, exploited for less than a minute, adjusted where the phone was, who sat behind the wheel, and which camera held the longer look. At 7:42, a patrol sergeant reviewed the first clips on a precinct workstation. The market video confirmed the child's purchase and exit. The shelter clip showed the scan of the code and the stop of the hatchback at the curb. The taxicab clip offered the clearer view of the vehicle's silhouette and the moment the rear door opened. The three angles, placed in sequence, covered 90 seconds. They did not show a license plate all the way through, and they did not show what the phone reported later. They did, however, fix the rupture to a clock reading that everyone could point to: 4:15 in the afternoon. The ticking element was not only the 72-hour limits on various loops, it was also a set of daily patterns about to roll over. Weekend traffic that would thin by night, shopkeepers who would close and be unavailable until Monday, a public lost and found that collected items at 8 each morning and moved them to a basement room without cameras. It included the phone's battery, which, if merely drained and not disabled, would not survive the night. It included a rideshare platform's worker app that cycled job histories from readily accessible screens into deeper storage, where only a court order would retrieve them, and a counterfeit web page that might be taken down or altered once news spread and the poster felt heat. Each clock ticked on different hardware. By 8:20, the parents had provided current photos, which the desk clerk scanned and attached to the incident file. The officer who placed the camera holes had finished initial door knocks along the block. A neighbor volunteered that a person had been posting various flyers on the shelter in the past week. He produced a phone image time-stamped 2 days earlier showing a different flyer with a different code. The city maintenance system, queried by the on-call engineer, returned no permits for any such postings. The pattern, laminated plastic on municipal glass, had been ongoing. That established repetition, if not yet identity. By 9, an investigator with the weekend duty phone drew a rough map: school, tram to market, market to shelter, curb stop, last phone ping southbound. She labeled each with the artifact that fixed it in time. No single element was dramatic. They were, collectively, exact. In a case report, this is where the language thins: a child, a camera, a receipt, a phone tower. The point was not to make the ordinary dramatic. The point was that the ordinary kept time better than memory. At 9:30, the officer called the rideshare's emergency contact number listed in the platform's law enforcement guide. The existence of a guide meant the company had capacity. The weekend officer on the other end indicated that account and trip data could be preserved on a good faith request pending formal process. The preservation request went out at 9:37 with the incident number and the time window around 4:15. That set a hold on any trip creation, driver logon, or rider request from the area. Whether the hatchback belonged to the platform at all, this step prevented the erasure of evidence if it did. The day closed with the incident promoted to active. The parents returned to the flat by 10, and the building entrance camera recorded their entry. The market manager locked up at 10:15. The dome cameras continued to write to their local recorder, now under hold. The shelter, glass and metal under streetlight, kept reflecting passing cars and empty benches. Inside the soffit, the dome lens recorded nothing remarkable for hours. Then, a municipal cleaning crew's van arrived shortly after midnight to wash the pavement. The laminated notice with the code remained stuck to the glass, its corners lifting slightly in the damp. The rupture was simple in description and weighty in consequence. A child stepped into a car that looked like work and did not arrive where she was expected. The clocks were mechanical, legal, and human. Before the market cameras rolled through their 72 hours, before the bus roof server cleared a Saturday clip, before a counterfeit page decayed. The spine built from taps, receipts, cameras, and pings had to be joined while it still existed. The ordinary timed objects that had watched an ordinary loop became the only way to measure what had misused it. The first hour of Sunday held to process. At 8:03 in the morning, an officer signed out a portable drive and walked into the market before opening. The manager unlocked the DVR cabinet and allowed export of the previous 48 hours under the hold. The officer labeled the drive with incident number and time bounds, Saturday 1400 through 2200. Across the street, a transit maintenance tech opened the shelter's small enclosure, verified the recording unit's clock drift at -41 seconds, and cloned the interval surrounding 16:15. Each segment received a checksum and a line in a chain of custody log. The footage moved from devices that simply overwrote to a format that would not. Across town that same hour, a different person executed a routine of concealment. Inference marked these steps because they left shadow records rather than bright ones. A prepaid SIM card added to a handset the previous Tuesday stopped registering to any tower at 8:22. The pay-as-you-go account had been topped up at a kiosk that accepted cash and printed no name on the receipt. A tablet used the day before switched its network setting to airplane mode at 8:30. A hatchback's magnetic door signs had been removed. A later video would show the same car without them. The laminated notice remained on the shelter glass. Nothing in those acts was cinematic. Each was simply a subtraction timed to beat ordinary retention windows. The investigation began as additions. The taxicab fleet server produced the dashboard video in full resolution at 9:14, with GPS breadcrumbs plotted at 1-second intervals across the minute when the child entered the hatchback. The clip showed the rear door open, a silhouette sliding in, the orange vest in the driver's seat, and a unique scuff on the bumper, a pale crescent on the right corner that reflected sunlight. A municipal traffic stanchion 2 blocks north returned 3 partial plate reads between 1614 and 1616 with confidence scores above 80. 2 letters and 1 number manifested consistently. The rest fell below threshold. The combination would prove rare. At 9:42, patrol recovered a second witness object not designed for policing. A library-returned kiosk that recorded every deposit with a frame grab and timestamp to deter disputes over late fees. At 16:16 the day before, a patron dropped a book and lingered, and behind the patron the hatchback rolled through the frame with a slight fishtail to avoid a delivery truck. The frame froze the rear window placard and the PVC mast that held it. Online images of similar masts showed that only a handful of vendors sold that exact profile and clamp. Each sale left order numbers and addresses. At 10:19, the first procedural friction asserted itself. The rideshare platform's law enforcement liaison acknowledged the preservation hold and attached a form letter. Account and trip data would be maintained, but production required a court order. It was Sunday. Warsaw's duty prosecutor could issue an urgent order by fax, but the volume of weekend requests meant triage. The investigator drafted a short affidavit focusing on 3 verbs: spoof, solicit, convey. The child had been solicited by a counterfeit posting mimicking the platform, conveyed by a car using the platform's livery, and the platform's internal logs could show whether any account had been used as shell to lend authenticity. Until the order issued, the team worked around the platform's wall by widening the concentric circles of ordinary cameras. The next ring came from shops that sold the costume. At 10:53, a team visited a hardware and safety store 2 tram stops away that carried high-visibility vests and generic lanyards. An owner pulled receipts for the past 10 days keyed to the SKU for orange vests. On Thursday, 2 had sold at 12:41, paid cash. The CCTV above the counter captured a person in a dark hoodie with a surgical mask purchasing those vests and a pack of adhesive laminating pouches. The same person bought a PVC rod and hose clamps in a second transaction 2 minutes later. A detail almost trivial made the clip useful. The buyer carried a brand-specific reusable bag from a print and copy chain 2 blocks farther south. At 11:31, an officer stood under a ceiling fisheye at that print and copy chain and watched Saturday's morning footage on a manager's monitor. The timestamps showed a walk-in at 10:08 printing 3 color pages with rounded corner logos and layout blocks that matched in a generic way. the rideshare pallet. At 10:12, the same individual laminated the print using an in-store machine and trimmed corners with a small cutter that knocked off half-moons of plastic. The manager produced a till tape. Job number 5658. Cash, no loyalty card. The trash bin next to the cutter still held the trimmings in a translucent bag. A tech sealed the bag, marked it, and logged it as recovered. Later comparison would find the same laminating film type and cut radius on the shelter notice, a mundane correlation that nonetheless tied the counterfeit to a machine and a time. The shelter notice came down under evidence gloves at 11:56. A city tech used a plastic scraper to free one corner, then eased the rest to preserve any ridge detail in the adhesive layer. The back of the laminate bore a pattern of shallow striations specific to the print shop's cutting wheel, identifiable under a loop. The QR code led to a short URL that redirected to a domain registered 3 weeks prior via a privacy-masked registrar. The landing page mimicked the platform's rider interface and pre-filled the shelter location. A network specialist imaged the page on a right-blocked laptop and pulled the server headers. The site lived on a small virtual private server with a Polish IP block assigned to a budget hosting company. The host's weekend abuse contact accepted a preservation request at 12:39, pending formal legal demand. At 13:12, a side street camera 2 kilometers south yielded a new angle. A bakery's exterior camera recorded the hatchback at 16:22 on Saturday, making a left turn. The orange vest in the driver's seat remained visible. The rear window placard's bottom left corner had peeled slightly. In Monday light, that detail would matter, but even on Sunday it helped match disparate frames. The bakery's footage also captured the car's front end. The right headlamp had a cloudy lens unlike the left, an asymmetry that, combined with the bumper scuff and placard, reduced the field of possible matches. The child's phone still did not report. At 13:50, the investigator submitted an urgent cell site data request through the carrier's portal for the handset's last 24 hours. Tower IDs, sector orientation, and timestamps. The carrier's emergency team responded at 14:30 with a CSV, showing the final handshake at 16:23 with a sector facing southwest near Puławska Street, and a second, weaker registration 5 minutes later, 1.3 kilometers away near a low-rise residential complex with underground parking. The second reading, shallow and brief, suggested the phone may have been briefly reachable before going silent under concrete. It was an inference labeled as such, but it gave the team a direction. Garages, not highways. Underground garages held their own bureaucracies. At 15:02, the team contacted the management office of the complex suggested by the tower map. The Sunday receptionist offered to email a week's worth of vehicle entry logs from the gate controller, timestamps, and the last 6 characters of any plates captured by the camera mounted at bumper height. The list arrived at 15:21. The window from 16:20 to 16:30 contained 3 entries. One matched none of the 3 partial plate patterns harvested from the municipal stanchion. Another belonged to a resident minivan captured entering at 16:25 and exiting at 16:31. The third was a misread. The OCR engine produced characters that did not exist in Polish plates. The gate's camera saved the raw frames. An on-site visit at 15:54 allowed an officer to export that interval. The raw image clarified that the plate bore a smudge at the center, and the rightmost character carried a serif that the OCR misinterpreted. At 16:21 on Saturday, the frame showed the suspect hatchback turning in. The PVC mast, now visible head-on, reflected against the gate's brushed steel. The rear placard sat lower than in earlier clips, its left corner lifting. The bumper scuff, crescent-shaped on the right, aligned with the market clip. The headlamp asymmetry reappeared in the reflection. A security guard's handwritten log recorded no visitors. Underground garages rarely note who sits behind the wheel, only what moves past the lens. The gate did show one more detail. A guest fob had been used 12 minutes prior to open the same entry without a corresponding plate capture, suggesting a person on foot had gone in first to call or guide the car down. The guest fob bore ID number 6099B. A manager provided an assignment table. The fob belonged to Unit B03, issued to a tenant under a 2-year lease starting in January. The apartment door camera on B03's floor saved 24 hours of motion-triggered clips locally and uploaded to a cloud only when the tenant paid for the service. The tenant had not. The building's policy permitted management to grant access to local storage for a police request, which the manager did at 1644. The clips for Saturday between 1625 and 1630 captured a shadow moving across the hall and a cart rolling with a large black bag. The camera's fisheye distorted shape and size. No face appeared. The cart itself, a folding metal dolly with a taped handle, was a model sold widely. It was a witness object with limited testimony. Still, it marked movement from elevator to apartment consistent with the gate timeline. At 1722, another ring of cameras supplied a small but crucial patch. A petrol station 1 block from the garage held 2 exterior cameras, one on the forecourt, one pointed toward the street. At 1614 on Saturday, the hatchback idled at the exit with its turn signal on. The station's pump transactions showed no sale to that car, but the forecourt clip held the clearest plate image yet, obscured by grime, but legible enough for 3 characters to lock. Combined with the municipal partials, those 3 characters yielded a short list of registered vehicles, 4 hatchbacks with similar body styles in the voivodeship, one of which had been licensed with a recorded bumper repair the previous autumn following a minor collision. At 1810, the registry returned ownership for that plate, a rental agency that leased vehicles to delivery contractors. The agency's Sunday duty manager confirmed the car's VIN and provided the current renter's contract number, start date and address. A month-to-month rental paid in cash with a deposit, beginning 4 weeks ago. The provided address matched Unit B03 in the garage's assignment table. The convergence cut across systems that rarely shared tables, a gate fob log, a city plate camera, a pump camera, a registry file, and a rental agreement. The match was not a revelation. It was the arithmetic result of overlaps. The next friction was legal. Entry to the unit and seizure of devices required a warrant. The duty prosecutor reviewed the affidavit at 1940 and issued a search authorization at 1956 with scope for items used to impersonate transport services, vests, placards, laminates, devices used to create counterfeit pages, keys or fobs for property access, and any media holding footage. At 2040, a team entered the unit with the building manager present. The unit was spare. Inventory lists compiled against the warrant scope recorded 1 orange vest hanging from a chair back, 1 lanyard with a generic plastic ID holder, 1 PVC mast cut to window width, 2 magnetic door signs rolled and held by rubber bands, and a tablet with a blanked home screen. In the small kitchen, the trash contained offcuts of laminating pouches with half-moon bites taken from corners, identical to the trimmings recovered at the print shop. In a closet, a folding metal dolly with tape on its handle matched the camera silhouette from the hallway. A prepaid SIM packet without the card rested in a drawer with 2 cash receipts, one from the safety store for adhesive pouches and clamps, one from the print and copy chain for job number 5658. Each item went into numbered bags, photographed in place first, then sealed and logged out with time and initials. Devices required imaging. The tablet powered on at 2058, but would not connect to any network without a password. A phone recovered from the unit contained no SIM and displayed a welcome screen. A laptop on a small desk powered onto a generic login. A portable storage kit arrived at 2132. Forensic techs imaged the laptop's drive with a write blocker and hashed the image. Initial triage of user folders found a cache of web icons and style sheets copied from the rideshare's public pages and a local HTML file titled rider_short.html with a hard-coded logo image and fields for pickup location and confirmation. The file's modified time aligned with the print and copy visit on Saturday morning. Browser history showed visits to a low-cost VPS host and a registrar 3 weeks prior. The laptop's Wi-Fi history included the building's network and the market's network SSID seen the previous afternoon. At 2212, a garage-level camera the team had not identified earlier yielded another angle. A repair shop inside the complex, closed on weekends, kept a camera over its roll-up door. Its local DVR did not overwrite on a 72-hour loop. It archived to a larger drive with monthly retention. The shop owner, reached by phone, allowed a remote export by his son, who lived upstairs. The clip at 16:26 on Saturday showed the hatchback pulling into a bay marked Guest, the driver exiting in an orange vest, and a rear door opening briefly before the car moved again deeper into the garage. No faces appeared, but body size and gait would later be compared to other clips. For now, the clip supplied duration and location. The car had not simply passed through, it had stopped inside for nearly 2 minutes. The rideshare platform's data arrived at 23:41 after the court order faxed at 1956 propagated through the liaison's queue. The return listed no rider account for the child and no matched trip at 16:15 originating at the shelter. It did list one driver account associated with the renter of Unit B03, created 2 weeks earlier, never activated, and flagged for missing identity verification. The platform had no record of the car's plate attached to any authorized vehicle. The data did not incriminate. It did something more useful. It ruled out a legitimate trip as an explanation for the curbside stop. By midnight, the evidence chain stacked without flourish. A laminated notice manufactured at a specific time on a specific machine. A vest and lanyard purchased with receipts and captured on cameras. A hatchback identified by plate, scuff, and lamp. A garage fob assigned to a unit. A rental contract tied to the same unit. A laptop holding files that rendered a counterfeit page, and a path set by the child's own ordinary objects, receipt, taps, and the phone's last tower. The antagonistic logistics had been simple. Borrow trust by dressing as work, seed a location with a code, circle until a mark appeared, provide a door handle at the exact moment a confirmation screen raised expectation, then subtract signaling hardware, and return to rooms designed to keep whatever happens inside from the weather and from cameras. The turning point landed on paper rather than video. At 0120, the host that held the counterfeit page responded to a legal demand with a short log. The VPS had been created 21 days earlier from an IP address later resolved to the building's own network. The bill had been paid with a virtual card purchased for cash at a kiosk 2 tram stops from the safety store. The same kiosk's overhead camera archived 60 days, not 72 hours. Its clip for the relevant minute showed the renter of Unit B03 feeding bills into the machine and tearing the cardboard envelope away. The arrest warrant would not be written until morning, but the burden of proof had already shifted. The investigation no longer described a set of coincidences. It described an authored sequence with dates, locations, and purchased parts that matched in their banal specificity. The case file noted the clocks that nearly ran out and the ones extended in time. The shelter's 72-hour loop would have erased the scan if the hold had waited until Monday. The bus roof camera, now preserved, gave the earliest clean silhouette of the hatchback. The underground garage's gate log held only 10 days. The urgent call on Sunday kept it in reach. The print shop's trash would have been emptied on Monday at 7. The retrieval at 11:56 beat the routine by 19 hours. The workaround for the platform's legal barrier had not been a hack. It had been a decision to harvest every ordinary lens in public space while formal fax routes warmed up. By dawn, the map on the investigator's desktop had thickened with pins. Shelter, market, print shop, safety store, kiosk, petrol station, garage gate, repair bay camera, Unit B03. Lines traced the car's path in one color and the phone's last handshakes in another. A last line, faint and dashed, ran from the laptop's Wi-Fi history to the market's router SSID, a confirmation that the machine later imaged had been within range of the child's purchase minutes the day before. The lines did not predict outcomes or fill in acts not on camera. They did, however, make one claim clear in the quiet language of artifacts. What happened had not been a chance encounter. It had been logistics. At 7:20 on Monday morning, the arrest team logged entry to Unit B03. A custody form recorded one adult detained without incident, photographed, and transported. A contemporaneous inventory noted keys for the hatchback, a ring with a plastic fob marked 6099B, and a wallet containing a laminated contractor card for a delivery service that later reported no current engagement with the bearer. The rental agency, contacted at 8:12, transmitted the contract addendum showing a telematics module installed for fleet insurance. Its portal, accessed under warrant at 9:04, produced a trip trace for Saturday from 16:14 to 16:21, ending in the underground garage, with engine off and door open events recorded at 16:22 and 16:24. Interview schedules followed the custody log, but drew their content from records rather than conversation. A delivery manifest. The detainee presented listed 5 drop-offs in Walkie on Saturday between 1300 and 1530. The tracker's breadcrumb placed the hatchback on the Mokotov loop during that same period, including the pass by the tram shelter at 1615. The manifest, printed from a template, used a font and header that the delivery service had retired the previous year. Company email attested to the change with a time-stamped policy notice. The contradiction sat cleanly on paper. The claimed route could not have occurred where the car had been. Financial records from the rental agency showed cash payments on 4 Fridays at 9:30, each captured on a counter camera. Screenshots attached to the file showed the renter wearing the same orange vest later seized in the apartment on 2 of those mornings. A timeline sheet placed the cash payments against Saturday's purchases of adhesive laminating pouches and PVC hardware from the safety store at 12:41, the prints from the copy shop at 10:12, and the hosting and registrar charges 3 weeks earlier. The alignment of build steps with cash flows did not assert motive. It asserted preparation. A forensic report at 11:21 provided small, cumulative confirmations. Under oblique light, the adhesive face of the shelter laminate retained ridge-like impressions consistent with pressure from fingertips. The pattern was insufficient for identification. It did, however, match the striation template seen on the shop's cutting wheel, making a physical link between the counterfeit notice and the specific machine used to trim it. The dolly's taped handle in the unit carried minor blue fibers. The passenger side seat of the hatchback held a scatter of similar fibers that adhered to the upholstery under static. The lab sheet hedged its language, class consistent rather than unique, but the transfer supported a narrative of movement between car and apartment using that cart. The vehicle itself yielded its own quiet ledger. A vacuum cassette ran over the rear footwell and seat. Its filter, stained and bagged, later produced 2 hairs. Mitochondrial DNA could not name a person in isolation, but the lab compared the profile to a voluntary sample from the child's mother and recorded maternal consistency. The report labeled this an inference, not a confirmation, and stated its limits plainly. The rear door sill carried a print in dust showing tread from a common sneaker brand. No unique wear pattern linked it to any specific shoe. The bumper scuff measured in an arc of 8 centimeters. A repair invoice from the prior year documented a sanding and repaint on the same corner, a small echo between paperwork and paint. Device analysis proceeded in parallel. The laptop's browser history showed an access to the counterfeit writer, _short. HTML at 10:11 on Saturday with a local preview, then an upload to the virtual private server at 10:17. Server logs, delivered under legal demand, showed traffic spikes at 4:13 consisting of short visits from mobile devices, including the child's based on the carrier's anonymized token list. A phone extracted from the suspect's pocket on arrest contained no SIM, but did hold a photo roll with images of the placard mounted in the hatchback's rear window, taken on Thursday evening in the underground garage. Metadata placed the images at that location and time. A reflection in one frame showed the PVC mast's clamp and the car's headlamp asymmetry. The detainee submitted a written statement through counsel claiming that he had never picked up riders, that the vest and placards were for a legitimate delivery route, and that on Saturday afternoon he had been in the garage repairing a tail light. A maintenance request form produced from the building manager's file listed no such request. The garage gate logs recorded entry at 16:21 and exit at 19:54. No interim exits appeared. A repair shop camera inside the garage captured the hatchback stationary in a guest bay from 16:26 to 16:28, and then moving deeper, consistent with the telematics door open events. No footage showed a taillight repair. The vehicle inspection at the time of seizure documented no work in progress and no tools in the car other than a multi-driver under the seat. The holds placed over the weekend yielded further patterns beyond Saturday. Bus roof cameras, reviewed across 5 days, recorded the hatchback circling 3 separate shelters in the same district on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday afternoons between 1600 and 1700. Laminated notices with scannable codes appeared in 2 of those shelters in frames from Thursday and Friday mornings. The city maintenance ticketing system showed no approvals for any flyers in those locations. The copy shop's job log listed 2 additional print jobs the previous week with rounded corner layouts, printed cash, at 10:05 and 10:22 on different mornings. The abductive arc hardened into a practice, not a single improvisation, but a method repeated until it caught. On Tuesday, the court extended pretrial detention. The charge sheet used plain statutory language: unlawful deprivation of liberty, impersonation in order to obtain a benefit, and computer fraud. Counsel argued lack of direct harm evidence. The prosecution countered with chains of devices and logs. The standard remained the same. The case would rise or fall on artifacts that fixed where and when, and on contradictions between claimed benign purpose and recorded structure. The child's recovery, recorded at 9:41 on Monday by a social worker's intake form, remained mercifully minimal in detail by design. The form indicated that patrol found the child seated in a stairwell on the ground floor of a commercial building 1 kilometer from the garage at 8:58 after a passerby called about a distressed minor. A camera in the lobby recorded the child exiting a service corridor on her own. A second form logged a brief medical evaluation and release to family. No narrative beyond safe recovery entered the prosecution file. The case would proceed on what led to the rupture and on the logistics that positioned it. By Wednesday, the virtual private server host delivered full access logs under court order. The IP address used to administer the counterfeit page resolved back to the building's network on 8 occasions and to a nearby cafe's guest network on 2 mornings that aligned with the print jobs. The cafe's router kept a longer retention for connection logs. Its list showed a MAC address matching the laptop's Wi-Fi card. The copy shop's security camera at 10:12 on Saturday captured a distinctive scrape on the laptop lid. The scrape appeared in the apartment seizure photo. Individually, none of these lines named intent. Collectively, they made a geography of preparation. The rideshare platform, though not the source of the counterfeit page, became an ancillary witness. Its driver onboarding records showed the detainee's attempt to create an account 2 weeks earlier using the same name as the rental contract and the same plate number as the hatchback. The attempt stalled at identity verification. The platform flagged the account as inactive. A help desk email preserved by the platform recorded a message from the same email address inquiring about signage use without activation. The platform's policy response, automated, stated that unauthorized display of livery violated rules. The detainee's laptop held a screenshot of that policy page. A magistrate later noted the contradiction. A person who claims lawful purpose had received a notice explaining that the costume he built was not authorized. To stabilize identification further, investigators obtained a court order for a photographic comparison analysis. A gate analyst reviewed the figure in the garage camera, the copy shop footage, the safety store clip, and the rental counter videos. The report, cautious and standard bound, concluded that the observed person exhibited consistent movement patterns, a slight out-toeing on the right foot, and a tendency to drop the left shoulder when turning. The limitation paragraph underscored that gait is a soft biometric. The finding supported, but did not prove sameness. The court accepted it as a minor corroborant. On Friday, the prosecutor filed a formal bill of indictment. The evidentiary list filled several pages. CCTV exports with checksums, telematics, CSVS, gate logs, registry returns, rental contracts, purchase receipts, server logs, device images with hash values, lab sheets, and the child's own artifacts, transit taps, and a point-of-sale receipt. The narrative section used no flourish, only nouns and times. It described a sequence where a person fabricated a context of trust, positioned a lure in public space, and arrived with a door handle at the moment a confirmation screen convinced. It described a removal from ordinary lanes into a structure optimized for concealment, evidenced by a gate log, a guest fob assignment, slabs of concrete that silence phones, and a building's own cameras that record only edges. In pretrial filings, defense counsel argued that many components were generic. Vests are sold in any safety shop. PVC masts hold flags at amateur races. Laminators exist in every copy shop. Websites can be cloned by any novice. The prosecution's answer pointed back to timestamps that braid. The counter receipt at 10:12 for rounded corner prints. Server logs showing an upload at 10:17. The shelter camera recording a scan of the laminated code at 16:15. The taxicab's clip of a door opening immediately after. The telematics trace placing the hatchback underground at 16:21. And the garage camera's silhouette pushing a cart at 16:26. Generic parts stopped being generic when they nested in time. No single flourish decided the case. Instead, it narrowed by attrition. The court admitted the server logs and telematics under standard business records exceptions. The city's maintenance records established that no permit existed for the laminated notice, a small administrative absence that gave a criminal act its first legal edge. The rental agency's insurance tracker, the most prosaic part of a contract, became the most precise watcher of motion in a window where many cameras ran out of luck or angle. The repair shop's prudential choice to keep longer retention video in case of night break-ins turned into a keystone because it saw the guest bay for 2 minutes on a Saturday afternoon. In June, the verdict arrived. The court found the defendant guilty of unlawful deprivation of liberty and computer fraud, acquitted on a charge of attempted human trafficking due to absence of corroborating acts beyond the initial conveyance, and imposed a sentence within the mid-range, along with a prohibition on employment in any role involving conveyance of passengers for a period of years. The court's written justification returned again to artifacts: the counterfeit page's code and hosting, the ride-mimicking paraphernalia, the garage fob assignment, and the incoherence between the paper manifest and the car's recorded path. The absence of injury detail in the file was deliberate and right. Responsibility had been settled without using harm as spectacle. After sentencing, the city's transport office issued a quiet policy bulletin. Laminated notices on shelters would henceforth use a proprietary microprint and a serial number keyed to work orders, with any unsigned laminate subject to immediate removal. The rideshare platform revised its public safety page to advise riders to use only in-app confirmations and to avoid scanning codes in uncontrolled environments. The rental agency changed its intake so that telematics portals were set to alert for vehicles entering underground garages after 4 in the afternoon without a declared work order, a small flag to catch out-of-pattern stops. The copy shop chain updated a policy to retain job metadata longer when prints used distinctive layout blocks that mimicked well-known brands. The case file closed with pages many would skip: preservation logs, fax confirmations, chain of custody signatures. Those pages, not the clips themselves, ensured that the story held under scrutiny. The narrative never relied on a single extraordinary device or confession. It relied on the city's ordinary machines keeping their ordinary time and on people willing to move on a Sunday before buffers emptied. A child had moved through a routine built from timetables and badges. A person had used that habit to script an interception. The objects as witnesses, laminate striations, a plate scuffed and imperfect, a gate's 6-character memory, a server's header, brought the script to the surface without spectacle. The prevention lesson belonged less to the courts and more to the interfaces of daily life. A shelter glass panel had held a counterfeit code because it looked official enough. The fix would not be a poster or a press conference alone. It would be making it harder to counterfeit authority at the point of glance. Microprint on city laminates, QR frames that riders recognize and imposters cannot cheaply clone, weekend duty channels that speed verification, and retention windows long enough to let a Monday case keep Saturday's proof. The system had not failed in a dramatic collapse. It had been leaned on where it flexed, the seam between trust in uniforms and the ease of printing one. The remedy, incremental and dull, would be applied in the same place.